Good morning and welcome to High Ash Farm. It's a cloudy morning here. I think rain is threatening, and doing my early morning rounds at the farm here, and Rat has just jumped out of the truck, my demented terrier, but in the gloom I can see where he is this morning because I bought him a high-vis jacket, and this luminous dog is running ahead of the truck, just going down the track, and we're just looking at some of the jobs that we'll need to be doing later on the farm today. Now, High Ash Farm is a little bit unusual, as you might expect. I've got an unusual dog and a weird farmer. It's all hills, and yet Norfolk is known, most of Norfolk anyway, to be completely flat. And the hills are left here by the glaciers of the last ice age. And it's really interesting because there's a whole variety of soil types here. Clays on top of the hills, sands and gravels halfway down the valleys, and at the bottom, deep alluvial soil where the most fertile land is. So none of the crops ripen at the same time. It's always a challenge, and on the tops of the hills on a dry year, often the cereal crops would die on their feet if you get hot July day just before the crops are ripened, and the sugar beet would always wilt flat onto the ground, and yet in the bottom of the valleys they would thrive. So I'm about halfway up one of these hills, and I'm just walking up a track here, and beside me lots of rabbit digging. Sort of brown soil come out of the burrows as I walk up, and then slightly different soil colour has come out of this rabbit burrow right in front of me. And Rat's ahead of me. He's sniffing down each of the burrows to see if there's anything interesting to have a dig at. And this burrow is quite large. Often people think when they see a large burrow, it's this one probably a foot in diameter. It would be dug out by a fox, but because the soil halfway up this hill is very sandy, the rabbits dig the burrow out and the top of the burrow collapses, and then they dig some more soil out, and eventually you have quite a large burrow, which foxes could go in, but nearly always they're responsible by the rabbits digging constantly, enlarging the warren. So it's quite a steep hill coming down towards me, and just walking along, lots and lots of rabbit holes. I'm just looking for one that I can see right down into the depths of the ground, so to speak. There's lots of them. Good. That's a good one. Perfect. Lots of sand has come out of the burrow, and I'm just on my hands and knees and looking into the rabbit burrow now, and I can see in about 5 or 6 feet. I'm just going to reach in a little bit and pull some of the soil out. But it isn't soil, it is pure white sand. Rat has come out. He's going down there, but he's got his coat on so he would get stuck. Good, he's come out. The soil is just pure sand, so it won't hold any water, which explains why the crops just die away when you get these hot, dry spells that we seem to be having out in the countryside during the summer months. So it's very little use, but it does tell us a history here that millennia ago this was a seashore. It's quite hard to imagine because I'm halfway up a valley, so the sea levels must have been hugely higher than they are today, although we're worried about global warming and sea height actually increasing each year. It must have been like nothing on earth back then, millennia ago, because the water in the valleys, I mean, it would have been most of the towns in the United Kingdom would be underwater. Certainly London and Norwich, which is just to the north of the farm, the whole of that would have been under the sea. Quite amazing. And these valleys and were quite deep. So where I'm standing, I would have actually been underwater, and the waves would have been splashing round me, because sand is formed by the constant action of the sea waves on shingle, rock originally, then shingle, and you get those lovely round pebbles where the sea actually washes over the shingle and actually takes all the little sharp edges off, so you have larger pebbles, perfectly round, and then right down to pea shingle size, and then the sea on those knocks tiny little fragments off, and you have this lovely pure white sand which is all around me here at the farm. So, just to create a picture a little bit more vividly, I've invited Matthew Gudgeon out to the farm this morning. He'll be heading on a little bit later on, and he's going to be joining me, and I'm going to take him, it's a boys' day out. We're going down to the seaside and have a look at the seashore, because it's only about 14 miles away as the crow flies. The Norfolk coastline is quite close to the farm at this point, and so we'll be able to actually look at some of the sand and the early formation of land where the sand gets swept up the beach and forms dunes. So it's a little area of coast that I know really well, at Winterton-On-Sea. So he'll be coming along sort of mid-morning when he's got himself out of bed, and we'll trundle down there and just do a little exploration of some of the different soil types. So in future podcasts, we'll be looking at some of the clays, some of the deep alluvial soils here at the farm, and some of the peat as well, because we've got an area of bog which you can jump up and down on, and it's as bouncy as a sponge. And they've all formed from different types of habitat and different rock formations, particularly the clays, which can really good at retaining water, whereas sand, as you know, if you put a bucket of water on it, it just goes straight through, which is what makes it so unstable as well. So Rat's now the other side of the bank, beside a newly planted hedge, and he's looking at me, say, come on, just sitting there doing nothing like most farmers do. So come on, let's get some work done, and we'll just wait for Matthew to arrive, and then we'll head off to the coast. As it's rain is threatening, the cloud, it's hardly got light this morning yet, and so I'm expecting some rain. There we are. Come on, Gudgeon, I'm waiting for you. That might be him in his private jet, I'm not sure.
So Chris Skinner phones me up and says, let's have a morning by the seaside. And I said, oh yes please, ice cream and kiss me quick hats and all sorts of things like that. So here we are on a beach about 15 miles from Chris's farm, and it is pouring with rain. It's completely deserted here, and Chris has had to improvise with, what's this?
It's a bin liner over my head. I did make a hole in it. I didn't bring a coat because when we left High Ash Farm, it was reasonably dry and almost sunny there, and then we've hit some sort of coastal showers. But we're right by the sea here. You can hear it roaring away in the background. There's some good breakers coming in, a bit of an onshore wind this morning. And I brought us here because at High Ash Farm, we had the valleys and the hills, and all the way round the sort of hills, about halfway up them, is a layer of pure sand. And it's always fascinated me, because it's the same sand as we have here. It's only 15 miles away as the crow flies to this point of the Norfolk coast from High Ash Farm. And sand forms in a really interesting way. The sea is constantly pounding shingle and rocks over the millennia. All the shingle sort of butts together, and eventually little tiny chips break off it, and it forms sand. And so we have many parts of the Norfolk coast have sand all the way around. Some have pure shingle, and when you see the big waves coming in on the shingle, it sort of smashes them together and you have sand forming. Now, that's the bit that fascinates me. So we're standing, looking out to sea. The waves are coming in towards us, but can you see they're not coming in straight up the beach? They're coming at an angle, like from over there. They're following the wind.
Yes, you're facing north, aren't you? We're here
Yes.
at Winterton-On-Sea,
Yes.
which is very popular in the summer, not so popular today, but yeah, there's this angle, but fairly constant wave action coming in.
Absolutely, but it's coming at an angle, and that's the important thing. And it's got a particular name. It's called swash. Right, that's the important thing. It's coming in sideways, and I've always thought it meant sideways wash. Two words kind of joined together, but it isn't that. It's really just the sound that we're hearing here, this lovely sort of constant sound of the waves coming in on shore. But something interesting happens when the waves go back down the beach. They go back at right angles. So you've got waves coming in from one direction and the water going back at another direction. And over time, it moves the sand further down the beach until the next point, either the next bay. So here we've got a wave coming in right towards us, but it's a different angle to the waves coming in off the sea. There it goes back, and it's going back at right angles down the beach, look. So it's actually moving all these little particles further down.
So we're facing south, and that's where the drift is it?
Yes, the drift is further southwards at the moment.
And Great Yarmouth is about 4 or 5 miles
That's
up
right,
there, isn't it?
and there's been quite a lot of erosion down there, and only a mile further down the beach, the same amount of erosion as there has been at Winterton-On-Sea here, and that's at Hemsby, and there's been some serious erosion there. The erosion here at Winterton happened about 3 years ago, and where we're standing would have been about 25 to 30 feet high, and it's all washed away onto the beach. And further down there, just south of Winterton, before you get to Hemsby, some of the dunes were 80 or 90 feet high, and they're all in the sea now. So this part of the coastline that we're standing on is raised up 3 or 4 feet. So the erosion has actually stopped here, but the old beach calf has gone. There's still some rocks sort of 30, 40 yards out from the cliffs there, all made of sand.
That brings it home, doesn't it?
Yes.
You can definitely see there 50 odd yards.
Yes.
Has just disappeared.
Absolutely. So, on dry, sunny days, which makes me smile, we haven't got today.
I've just put a vision in your mind here. I have sat here for virtually a whole day with my windbreak and my...
Your knotted handkerchief on your
all
head.
of that, yes, with the test match on the radio, on happier occasions, yes.
Anyway, on dry, sunny days, the wind comes in off the sea and the sand layer dries very, very quickly on the top. I've been here on days when it's not always sunny, but it's been very windy, and it's like standing being shot blasted. So even at 4 or 5 feet high, and if I brought a dog with me, I just feel so sorry for the dog that we desert the beach and go up on the top of the sand dunes. So we're now walking back up the beach, and something interesting happens. So when this sand blows up the beach on dry, hot, sunny days, it will reach what we call the strand line, which is the limit of the high tides at any particular time of year.
And there's some seaweed here, isn't there?
Exactly that, yes. So there's last night's high tide, and the night before is even further back up the beach. So obviously the moon is in abeyance at the moment, so the tides aren't quite so high. And usually, if you get a period of long calm weather, you'll have some sea plants growing along this strand line. Things like scarlet pimpernel. We have scarlet pimpernel at the farm, but the coastal pimpernels have a much deeper root system, so they're able to sort of start forming what we call a fore-dune. That sounds like some terrible disaster, a fore-dune, but it actually starts to establish dunes. So the sand will blow in and cover those plants up, and then you'll get a big autumn storm, and it does away with all the 4 dunes, but the dunes behind here will still remain. So only another 20 paces or so, and we get to the sand cliff. And they say you should never build a house on top of sand, and you can see why here, because it's all cascading in onto the beach.
It's about 15, 20 foot high, isn't it, this cliff?
At least that,
But
Matthew.
as crumbly as an OXO cube.
Yeah, other cubes are available, yes, but interestingly, big clumps of marron have cascaded down, and they're just trying to get another foothold. But 2 species of grass, apart from the marron grass, also start off. They're called lime grass and sea couch grass. Sea couch grass sort of starts off because the seeds will blow out down here, quite close to the sea. And a lot of respect for couch. We have it at the farm. It's a slightly different species, but it grows by rhizomes. And that's the secret of this grass growing up on top here, the marron, because as we walk up, we'll try and scramble back up. It's quite a steep climb for us.
But the marron binds a lot of this together, doesn't it?
It does, but when you have coastal erosion, there's absolutely nothing to stop it, because the sand is so crumbly underneath it, it just washes away if the sea's able to get up. And as we're having sea level rises at the moment, there's nothing to stabilise this, because it's just like you'd have an egg timer. It's very, very fine sand, and this is all blown up from the beach. This is quite surprising, but marron has got a trick up its sleeve. So we're right near the top now. Go up a little bit more, quite a climb.
You didn't tell me there wasn't a lift. Or an elevator.
Right, now we've reached the top of the marron cliff, and underneath there, where it's all cascaded away, we've got these roots. Here's one, and it's a rhizome, and all the way up the little rhizome you have little knots, and every time, if the knot is exposed, it will send up a shoot like this, a sharp shoot, and that penetrates through. Then you can see some seedlings on the top here of the marron grass. They're tiny, they're not actually seedlings, they come from these rhizomes underneath. So if I scrub that away, we would find a rhizome underneath. So very few plants can stand this kind of habitat because it's so fragile. The marron grass is growing, there's virtually no fertility here on the sand, so it's an absolute miracle plant, but it won't and it can't combat sea level rise. That's the problem with it. It will stabilise sand, and you can have these big dunes forming, sometimes 60, 70, 80 feet tall, all brought in by the wind. So the wind comes in, moves the sand off the beach up here when it comes in offshore, and forms these massive dunes.
And there are acres here, aren't there? Acres and acres.
There's several hundred acres here, but as you move inland, gradually the marron grass decays down, forms humus in the soil, so you start to have other plants like sea holly, sea bindweed, all forming again in this very high salinity situation. But it's not acidic because there's a lot of shells mixed in with the sand, all broken up, so it's quite a lot of lime in the soil. So absolutely brilliant habitat. So the further you walk in over the top of the dunes, the marron grass gradually drops away, and you'll have grasses, then you'll have rabbits grazing, and you start to have a different habitat forming. But in between the dunes you'll have hollows, and they're called dune slacks, and you'll have special amphibians living in there, reptiles as well, sand lizards, not particularly in this part of Norfolk, but we have adders here at Winterton. They love this habitat as well, and in the dune slacks you'll have water even in the middle of summer, and you'll have a special variety species of toad there called natterjack toads. They're quite amazing. You can be a quarter of a mile that way, and if the natterjack toads are calling where we're standing, you can hear them at a huge distance.
This site is so important for natterjacks, isn't it?
Yes, it absolutely is. Slightly different to our normal toad. They have a line, a yellow line down their back, but if you disturbed one and tried to pick it up, to put it to safety, they exude a really powerful smell. It's a mixture of gunpowder and burnt rubber. That's the only way to do, with a little bit of sulphur mixed in. It's quite distinctive. So they're so kind of toxic that other animals will tend to leave them alone. But the habitat in those dune slacks that they lay their spawn in has to be in water. If it dries out, then the whole generation for next year dies away. So again, like all dune habitats, it's very, very fragile.
And bird life, do we see ground nesting birds like terns here?
Yes, absolutely. This is a brilliant spot for terns, oyster catchers, sanderlings along the front of the beach here. And sometimes you'll see gulls as well doing sort of extraordinary tricks. I've seen blackhead gulls and herring gulls standing close to the water's edge, just out of the water, and they paddle their feet up and down like this, and that's to mimic the waves coming over. And that means if there's any worms just under the soil or cockles under there, the worms will think it's the tide running over the top of them, things like lugworms or ragworms as well, and they then gobble them up. So it's a trick that they learn. So sometimes you see unusual behaviour. Another lovely bird usually comes along here in little flocks is turnstones, and they'll be examining any of the little flints and small rocks, only about up to fist size. They can flick those over with their beaks and get any soil, sort of any invertebrates underneath there, small crabs, shrimps, prawns as well. And at this time of the year, once we're up to middle of November, which we are, and beyond, sometimes you'll sort of utter some sort of swear word under your breath because you'll see sort of white blobs blowing across the top of the beach and think, oh no, somebody's dropped a whole load of polystyrene. But it's not that, it's snow buntings which come across the North Sea to join our resident buntings, birds like yellowhammers, same family, but the males are astonishingly white and show up against the beach sand absolutely beautifully. And this is a favourite habitat for them just here at Winterton. I've often seen flocks of them just feeding on any seeds that blow off the top of the dunes. They'll eat the marram grass seed, which seeds at this time of the year. And when you look down across the top of the dune, Matthew, you can see some of the seed heads of the marram here, and that's a really important grass species for stabilising dunes that are not going to be washed away by the rising sea.
One thing I can see though, Chris, and let's just say straight away that there is some evidence of seabirds out to sea, but it's very grey and as you might be able to hear, very wet here today. But sandflies, insects are still there and buzzing around, aren't
yes,
they?
Of course, and any visiting birds that come in off the coast, off the near continent, it can be really cold just a few hundred miles east of us, and the birds will fly westwards to come across to our more hospitable environment. Birds like woodcock will make an early landfall here, and they will be looking for soil invertebrates, things like worms, but other birds will come across the North Sea and we'll be looking for those sandflies that you pointed out there, still in the rain on the top of the marram grass, just waiting for the weather to dry out to perhaps complete their life cycle. A lovely silhouette of some of the flies, and we're cruising up to winter now, so, and right out to sea, just as we arrived, I saw a lovely little pocket of scoters, common scoter ducks, which spend most of their life out to sea, jet black ducks, right out, perhaps half a mile out there, fishing for mussels out to sea. Just an amazing array, and always you can see seals here right at this part of the Norfolk coast.
But not today.
No.
Where are they? They'll be giving birth soon, won't they?
They certainly will. Just a little bit further down the coast here at Horsey, only half a mile away from where we are. That's a good haul-out point for them, and this is the time of year they give birth, the common seals. And there's a heck of a population here, and they'll be here over the next month or two. Lovely, absolutely lovely to see. Just remember, keep your dogs on a lead if you bring them here.
Keep away from the seals. Although the numbers are extraordinary. When I was a boy 50 years ago, it was very much a rarity to see a seal. Now you can barely help seeing them.
Look, there is one. It just popped its head up, Matthew. Only about 25 yards out.
I rest my case, my lord.
There's another one just there, right in front of us.
Yeah, oh my word, look at that. You can see the outline. That's a grey seal, isn't it?
Perfectly. Absolutely wonderful sight.
Right
there
on
you are.
cue.
Oh, wow, look at that. Just got its head up.
I think he's doing the butterfly.
No, he's just watching these two strange men because I look a bit worrying because I've got a black bin liner over my head. I rather look like a seal.
Well, I hope you're enjoying our postcard from Winterton-On-Sea on the Norfolk coast on a very grey and wet day. We're just painting a picture. At the back here, we've got the magnificent Winterton Church, one of the tallest medieval church towers anywhere, and acres and acres, hundreds of acres of the marram grass. And then the black fishermen's huts, and I know you've been to see the fishermen recently, and the sea defences, which are now stranded out on the shoreline because of this erosion. Looks almost like a latter-day Stonehenge.
I think you're quite right. I'd already thought that, actually. It does look really strange, and it's arranged in a semicircle. Those blocks weigh 2 to 3 tons each. The sea hasn't tried to shift them, but the sea's gone round the back of them and said, I'm coming in here anyway.
Well, we've got some questions to answer, so I think we ought to maybe repair to the farm truck.
Yes, and another seal over there. Look at that. So this place has got my seal of approval.
Well, we've come inside now into the shelter of Chris's vehicle that he's brought here to Winterton today, and we've got lots of correspondence, Chris, which is lovely to see, isn't it?
I know, it always gladdens the heart. I love lots of response, some praise or anything. We don't mind. We'll have a go at answering any questions as well.
Well, here are some of the emails and cards that have been sent in. First, hello to Jane Nicholson, also to Carl and Kai. And Jane says, we're really enjoying the podcast. It's a breath of fresh air. And we liked the woodland episode recently, Chris, and we took Kai, our grandson, for a visit. He asked to go. He really loves the little stream that runs through the wood and the little bit near the seat not far from the hollow tree. He spotted a large reddish-coloured bracket fungus there. It was growing out of the side of the tree and was curious to know what it was. Can you say hello to Kai?
Hello, Kai. Well done for spotting that fungus. It's a really interesting one. It's called a bracket fungus, and its proper name is a beefsteak fungus. And if you noticed, it's a kind of deep, dark red colour. And next time, if you come back and the fungus is still there, if you just get your little fingernail and run across the top layer of the fungus, it looks as though it's shedding some blood. It's a bright red juice will come running out of it. And years ago, furniture makers used to infect oak trees, and that's what this fungus was growing on. And it stains the heartwood in the tree, and they would make really high quality, classy furniture from the oak wood, and it would be a kind of mahogany red colour. So well done, and congratulations, Kai. I love your little comments about the stream. It's one of my favourite parts of the farm, just there.
You had a interesting set of visitors, I gather, the other day, a family from Sri Lanka.
Yes, and I thought they were just local. I'd come from Norwich, and they've done a special visit to the UK, and in particular to come to High Ash Farm. I couldn't believe it, and they arrived at the farm at 6 o'clock in the morning to watch the sun rise at 7, which they did. The whole family were there, Rahman and Tabitha Obara, with Talitha and Sonita, their 2 children. And they said hello to Rat without me introducing it. Both children said hello, Rat, and that's from the other side of the world virtually. So welcome to the United Kingdom, and hope you enjoy your visit to Ness Point, the most easterly part of the UK, to watch the sunrise there.
Well, in comparison, you've got a note here from someone who's really a next-door neighbour. Alistair Wright from Church Farm at Stalham says he loves the community radio aspect of what we do, and he enjoys listening to it with his small arable farm in Stalham. He watches the birds and other wildlife when he's working. He says, we've got a good selection here of raptors, sparrowhawks, kestrels, buzzards, the odd red kite, and we've got larks as well, a joy to listen to. We always get barn owls nesting in a couple of decrepit barns we've got too, and it's marvellous to hear people keeping the habitat going for the poor barn owls.
Yes, they're a red list species, and skylarks too. So we have them at the farm. We have barn owls as well. They're always a delight to see, and congratulations for helping biodiversity and just looking after the wildlife. That's a real heartwarming story. Well done.
It's still pouring with rain here at Winterton. You might have heard me closing the window just now. I was about to have to bail out here. But here's a note from Brian Williams, who is in London. But he says, living here in southeast London, it makes me very jealous of listening to you on High Ash Farm. Although we've got an abundance of foxes, squirrels, magpies and a number of other birds, I've missed the blackbirds this year. I haven't heard one in the garden. Sometimes I've heard them as early as January. The blackbird song always cheers me up no matter what's happening in the world. So what's happened to the blackbirds?
Well, at this time of the year, they don't sing, so part of that is a normal response. Some birds sing at this time of the year. Robins have just set up territories, and they'll be singing. We're well into November now. Blackbirds tend not to sing and mark out their territory with their song until January and February. That's the months you'll hear them, and then particularly again in March and April, they can be doing second broods by then. So they are songbirds, but they have a really restricted season in which they sing in. So all's not lost, so listen out carefully, particularly if you have a mild January towards the end of January and certainly into February. They can have eggs in the nest at that time of the year, and the cockbird will sing away from either top of a building or tree, particularly if there's street lighting in the area. That stimulates them to start singing earlier in the day before it's even light. So there we are, and you're quite right, it's one of my favourite songs, and it really does gladden the heart.
Next we send greetings to Meg Fernley, who lives in Bradford, New Hampshire. And she's sent a lovely card here. She's got 165 acres of woodland and wetlands and fields in New Hampshire, USA. And she loves listening to your podcast, Chris. Though I hear chickadees and scarlet tanagers instead of blackbird and chiffchaff. I also see black bears and moose rather than badgers and hares. But your dedication to the conservation of the natural world has been inspiring. So there's Meg sending a lovely note from around 100 miles south of the Great Lakes, which is the Canadian border.
Right over there, all that way away, 3,000 odd miles to get across the Atlantic there. So, and thank you very much for that. So no matter where you are in the world, you'll come across all different sorts of wildlife, different species, different habitats, and each of those species are exploiting their particular habitat. And what we have here in Norfolk is a mainly arable county of the UK, so we have mainly arable species as well, but we're by the sea today and we're going to come down and look at all the different habitats that you can see all around the Norfolk coastline. We have some cliffs, we have sandy shores, shingle beaches as well, and it's always a delight to share whatever wildlife finds a home wherever it is. Broadland here as well, close to where we're sitting, and then we've got heathland down in southwest Norfolk as well, so a whole variety of habitat, and all of those habitats have different creatures actually living and thriving in them. So thank you very much for that response all the way from Bradford, but not the one in the UK. Amazing.
Thanks to all our correspondents, and if you would like to send Chris a message, ask a question, whatever you like, the email address is chris@countrysidepodcast.co.uk.